Hello, 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 and welcome to a wonderful Wednesday. Today is 19th of March. I'm, of course, Scott Ford, your host for these live streams. Today, we're broadcasting out of my class talking about security fundamentals. This is going to be part one of 3 parts of a live stream specifically for security fundamentals. And we're focusing on the CompTIA ITF Plus as well as Tech Plus certification, but this stuff does show up on your A Plus certification, as well as can show up in your Network Plus and definitely on your Security Plus certification, just building more as it goes through. So I hope you enjoyed the live streams from spring break, and we're going to continue on. So again, we're going to be looking at security fundamentals here. All right, so without any further ado, let's actually get to what we're looking at. So here is security fundamentals. And like I said, this will be part one of 3. And our objectives for this particular unit or this particular live stream is going to be list and describe the components of the CIA triad, explain the concepts of least access, describe risk management, list and describe possible risk management responses, explain security policies and their purpose, list and describe the typical players in IT security, explain the importance of physical security, list steps and procedures to protect against fire and flood damage, and finally, for this live stream, explain the dangers of electrical variations and how best to protect digital equipment. And as you can see, there are more objectives that we will be covering in additional live streams. Now, one of the cool things about teaching security, especially fundamentals of security, is this is not necessarily a geeky computer techie thing that you don't need to know. We're talking about the basics that really everybody who's living in the digital age should be aware of as far as security goes. This is stuff you need to know just simply because you are, you work with computers. And we're not just talking about computers here. We're talking about other types of security as well as we go through this live stream. So lots of really good stuff. Even if you're not a techie, this is still worth knowing about. So first of all, let's start with something called the CIA. Now, this is not the CIA that I used to work for. Yes, I actually worked for the CIA. I did a contract work for them after I got done working for the FBI. Ooh, spooky stuff. Anyhow, we're going to talk about the CIA in the context of security. And the CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And all of security is based off of these 3 things. They really do kind of form the foundation of all of our security conversations. You might also hear this called the security triad or AIC triad. Now, before we go too far into this, I will say this. It has been my experience that PowerPoint will crash at least once during the live stream. So fingers crossed it doesn't crash, but in case it does, I do a little vamping, tell you a little story while I am feverishly working behind the scenes trying to launch PowerPoint again. So just a heads up. All right, so confidentiality. There was a great man by the name of Gandalf who told a hobbit, keep it secret, keep it safe. Confidentiality is the assurance that data is kept private and is protected against unauthorized disclosure. In other words, we keep our information secret. And almost all professions have some confidentiality requirements. So, for example, I wasn't kidding. I actually did work for the FBI and I did contract work for the CIA. And so working for the government, you have your different kind of classifications of, confidentiality, secret stuff that you're supposed to have. So, for example, you had unclassified, confidential, secret, and top secret. And then, of course, you had compartments underneath. But we also have confidentiality in other industries as well. So, for example, I went from the CIA to private training and private development, where I work for different companies. They had their levels of confidentiality. And, now I'm a classroom teacher. I teach at Tasceta High School here at Humble ISD, and I teach for Lone Star Community College. And it is illegal for me to disclose certain information about students. So, for example, I've got a student in my class. His name is Larry Fink, and Larry Fink is a horrible student. He is failing everything. Oh my God. He is failing this. He's failing that. Horrible. And let me tell you, His grade point average is like a 2.1. He got a 52% on the. I mean, could you imagine if this person actually existed in my class? I would be sued left and right. I would lose my license to teach because I'm breaking so many rules. Oh, yeah. And by the way, did I tell you about his health conditions? Oh, that's a whole other batch of secrets that I'm not supposed to disclose. These are protected by FERPA and all sorts of HIPAA. There's all sorts of regulations for a teacher about what we can and can't talk about. Now, kind of a funny little side note, what's interesting is I also teach college where supposedly we have adults in college, supposedly. And I had a parent contact me once about her child in college. Well, I couldn't tell a parent anything about their kid. So I'm like, ma'am, I can't tell you whether or not I have your child in my classroom. I can't confirm or deny they're in my room. I can't talk about that. But what I can tell you is, in general, according to my syllabus, here's what I'm grading on. So, because it would be illegal actually for me to talk about that student to a parent in college, unless certain paperwork was signed and I had no knowledge of if it was taken care of. So, if an organization is serious about confidentiality, it will separate information based on what level of confidentiality they considered those materials. And when trying to protect confidentiality, we use things like access control, authentication, and encryption, all concepts that we will cover in greater detail. Then we have integrity. Now, before we talk about integrity, let's pretend that you're playing a video game. Now, I play different video games, and let's say that I am, let's say 100 hours into Cyberpunk, okay, or whatever game that I'm playing. And I go to launch my game, and all of a sudden, my save has been corrupted. The save is gone. The save is corrupted. It just doesn't work. Well, what I experienced there is a lack of integrity. The data has been changed, whether it's intentional or accidental, and it was not supposed to be changed. And so the integrity of the information is been affected in some way. So integrity data has not been corrupted either intentionally or unintentionally. And we use different techniques to ensure integrity, including authorization, auditing, backup, and permissions. Then we have something called availability. Availability is making sure folks have access to the data and information they need to do their job. Now, security, honestly, would be so easy to do if we could take sensitive information, put it in a box, put it in a bigger box, put it in a bigger box, pour the whole thing in cement, then put it in another box, pour that in cement, and then drop it into the deepest part of the ocean. Nobody would ever get access to it, right? The information would be kept safe, but it's not very practical. People can't get to what they need to do. And so another concept, like I said, in security is availability. People need access to the information they need in order to do their job. It becomes a balancing act, however, to make sure they only have access to what they are supposed to use to get their job done. So here is a quick little summary of the CIA. And as simple as this is, like I said, all security is built off of this. So confidentiality, information and resources are protected from unauthorized people. Integrity, the files have not been corrupted. And availability, you can get to the resources when you need to get to your resources. And of course, I am drinking some Bones coffee off screen. Bones Coffee is not a sponsor of the podcast, but they definitely are the power behind them. So building off of our CIA, we have something called least access or something called least privilege. And this concept is basically users need the least amount of access and resources to do their job. They still need to do their job. We need to be out of their way, but we need to make sure they don't have access to things that they don't need to know or to work with. So this connects back to the CIA. Users only see data they need to do their job. This is confidentiality. Access to data is limited, which lowers the chance that that information can be messed with, destroyed, or just screwed up. Okay, that deals with integrity. And finally, with availability, if properly configured, users have access to the stuff they need. And honestly, they don't even know there's any security in the back end. If we've configured our data and our access correctly, They don't even know about the security things in place because it should be that seamless, right? Versus, I need access to this, I got to request access to this, I got to request access to this. They should have what they need in order to do their job. So that kind of begun the conversation of CIA. Let's take a look at some more concepts within security. One of the big things that's on the test, and one of the things that you should be aware of, is something called risk management. So risk management, these people are fun at parties um, because they're always looking for how things can go bad. Our job in risk management is to look at things and say, that could go wrong, that could go wrong, that could go wrong, and that could blow up, right? So risk management, our job is to see what bad things can happen, how bad they will be if they can happen, and how we can stop that bad thing from occurring. So it's a decision-making process that identifies assets and prioritizes threats and risks. Like I said, we're a lot of fun at parties. So a risk is defined as the chance that something will happen. A risk can be good or bad. It's not necessarily bad. Risk is not necessarily a bad thing. It's that something can happen. And that something could be something positive. It could be something negative. It's just that something somewhere will occur. Then we have opportunities. Opportunities are when risks have a positive, a good impact. So, for example, hopefully you're watching these videos because you are working on certification, or maybe you're watching these videos because you need to watch them for class. Both of these are opportunities. You're getting an opportunity to either get certified or to get closer to graduation. So it's a positive impact. Then we have threats. A threat is a risk that can have a negative impact. So, for example, we live here in the Houston area. We have this large body of water next to us, the Gulf of whatever, and we can have a hurricane come in. Well, that's a threat. If there's a hurricane a brewing or a tropical depression a brewing not far from us, that is a threat. That is a risk that something could happen and it's going to have a negative impact. And so that is what we call a threat. Then we have vulnerabilities. A vulnerability is a general term for a weakness. Threats exploit vulnerabilities. In security, it's our job to either eliminate these vulnerabilities or to reduce them as much as possible. Then we have residual risk. Now, most of the time, we can't get rid of all the risks that are out there. We can't get rid of all the possible negative things that can happen. What we can do, again, is just reduce the chances of things occurring. So, for example, locking your doors to your home at night, locking your windows at home at night, turning the lights on outside, having motion sensors, all these things reduce your chances of having a break-in. But it can still happen. These are the residual risks. These are the things that can still happen that are bad. We've just lowered the chances of them occurring. So let's take a look at responses. Now, responsible responses are things that we can do to kind of prevent things from happening or how to deal with the risks that occur. So possible responses to risk are based on the likelihood of them happening and what effect they'd have if they occurred. So for example, here in the Houston area, there's a good chance we're going to get a hurricane. Every year, there is a good chance we're going to get one, if not more, hurricanes. So the chances of it happening are high. The damage that can occur is high. An asteroid crashing into Earth, it's a possibility, but is it a likely possibility? Not really. And how much damage would it do? Well, ask the dinosaurs. So we have things that are likely to happen that could do a lot of damage and things that aren't likely to happen that could also do some damage. So just a general idea of how we start framing the conversation of the types of responses we take. The first one is risk avoidance. You avoid the risk. You don't do what would expose you to this type of risk. So for example, we know that smoking is bad for you. We've seen the PSAs, we have seen the things at schools. We know that smoking is bad for you. Smoking has, you get cancer, ages you early, all sorts of nasty things about smoking. So, in order to avoid the risk of the dangers of smoking, don't smoke. Okay, that's risk avoidance. You avoid the risk of all the dangers that come with smoking by simply avoiding smoking. Okay, so avoidance, however, isn't always the best or even a possible answer. But in situations where we can avoid the risk, that is definitely something we want to consider, risk avoidance. Then we have risk acceptance, accepting the risk and the consequences of whatever happens. Now, not all risks are bad. Okay, not all of them have serious outcomes, and some are just so unlikely that we don't need to worry about them. So going back again to an asteroid or striking the Earth, right? Well, we really can't do anything about it as of right now. At least not that I'm aware of. Maybe the government has some secret plans, some mecha robot somewhere. But we accept this risk. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that we ignore it. That doesn't mean we turn a blind eye to it. It means that we know this risk is out there. We're accepting that this is a possible occurrence. Okay. It could mean that they have put in place all the precautions against risk, but accept that there's still bad things can happen. Or you just say, look, yeah, it'll be bad, but the chances of it happening are rare to none. Then we have risk mitigation. This accepts that the risk could occur, but we take steps to minimize the damage that it could cause if things go pear-shaped. If things go, bad, we are reducing the damage that can happen when it goes bad. So, again, out here in the Houston area, we had a nasty little storm that came through this year that knocked out power. Casa de Ford, we lost power for 3 weeks. It stunk. Now, preparing for that hurricane, we made sure we had plenty of supplies. Of course, we hoarded toilet paper because that's what we do now, right? Everybody goes and grabs the toilet paper. By the way, to the 90-year-old lady who's watching, I'm sorry I punched you in the face, but it was Charmin. So I'm just saying. I'm kidding. But you do mitigation, right? You go out, you make sure you got supplies, you make sure you got plenty of water, you make sure you got, if you're a medication, you make sure you pick up your medication ahead of time. If it's something that you'll die if you don't take. So you get your stuff early, you prepare, right? You get your prep time. Now, for us, we weren't expecting 3 weeks without electricity. And so lesson learned, we finally broke down and bought a generator. So we are now mitigating the risk even further. We have battery charge and solar power, different things. We have a generator. We have different stuff. So when the hurricane comes through again, we're accepting that the hurricane will come, but we're mitigating the damage that it can cause once it gets here. So mitigation is we accept that there's a risk. This can happen. Let's lower our chances that bad things are going to occur because of it. Then we have risk transfer. This is when we let someone or somebody else or something else deal with the fallout of the event. Insurance companies are supposed to be basic risk transfer companies. So you have health insurance, you have home insurance, you have car insurance with the thought and the hope that if you get into an accident, if you get sick, if your house burns down, that they will cover the damages. You are passing on the risk to another entity. When it comes to technology, for example, with data backup, we might use things like Dropbox, Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive, iCloud to keep our data safe. We are passing on the responsibility to them. Okay, so covered a few topics so far. We're going to move now to security policies. So a security policy is something that we all are familiar with. Okay. For example, should you take candy from strangers? Probably not, right? You shouldn't take candy from strangers except one night a year where it's perfectly fine. Not only to take candy from strangers, but if they're completely dressed up where you can't see their face, go ahead. So we have our policies. Should you look both ways before you cross the street? Of course you should. We have security policies that are put in place to keep us safe. Lock the doors before you go to bed at night. Make sure no valuables are visible from the car. Don't talk to strangers. Don't take candy from strangers. Don't go to a party at P. Diddy's. These are different things that that are. I got a room full of students here. These are policies. These are security policies to keep us safe. Okay, so rules and guidelines we use to keep ourselves and our property safe, information safe. In the context of IT, security policies are the guidelines and rules that we use to keep our offices and our computer systems safe. Now, remember that most security problems are not high-tech problems. Okay, we like to think of bad guys and security breaches being these multi-million-dollar things. Honestly, usually our security issues boil down to one person who messes something up, who does something they shouldn't do, opens some email they shouldn't do, or click on a link they shouldn't do. We had an incident actually in our Discord channel, which, by the way, speaking of Discord, let me see here. Pull that over for you. You can join our Discord channel by scanning that QR code. That'll actually take you to the Discord that we have for Mr. Ford's class. And you can join in different conversations that we have there. But we had an issue there where somebody clicked on some link they shouldn't have clicked on, and they got attacked by some malware and their computer became compromised. Again, one person can mess it up and do a vulnerability that you weren't expecting in your entire network. Okay. We have things called acceptable user policies, AUPs. This stuff shows up on your ITF, your Tech Plus, and your A Plus exams. Your AUPs, your acceptable user policies, tell employees what they can and cannot do with company equipment and resources. Most security problems, like I said, are not high tech, but somebody's behavior. So acceptable user policies are, you can use this computer for this, but you can't go here. You can't do this. You can't do this. This is what you're allowed to do. This is what you're not allowed to do. I will say from an HR point of view, that's human resources, one of the fastest ways to lose your job is to violate your acceptable user policies. Don't do that. Then we have something called an emergency response plan. This covers what should be done in the event of an emergency, like an evacuation, shelter in place, actions to be carried out. We have emergency plans or response plans in our schools. So for example, here in high school, we have our fire drills, we have our shelter in places, we have our, go run, hide, and turn off the lights procedures. So we have different response plans that we follow. So let's meet the cast real fast of security. Now, just like role-playing games,
I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
So just like role-playing games, we have different characters, right? We have different characters you can play. You can play paladins, you can play rangers, barbarians, wizards, whatever. Well, in the world of security, we have these generically known things called threat actors. And so here are the different people that you might meet while you're walking down the street in the IT world. First, we have the white hats. These are the good guys. Okay, these are the good folks out there who are keeping your system safe. The white hats are the good guys. These are the folks usually hired by a company to fight off the bad guys. You might also hear them called ethical hackers and things like that. Now, I will say one of the first things that students do when they take a computer class is they want to become hackers. I want to be a hacker. Well, that's great. Learn the stuff. You're going to need to know a lot of stuff before you get into the security world. Then we have the black hats.
Your feeble skills are no match for the power of the dark side.
The black hats are considered the bad guys. They try to break into networks and systems without authorization. They might try to steal customer records, steal identities, infect systems with malware, and basically just be a massive nuisance to that organization. Then we have the gray hats.
What's wrong? I felt a great disturbance in the force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced.
The gray hats try to access systems without authorization just because they can. They might try to offer the company a fix for the vulnerabilities. They may let nobody know. They are basically there just to see if they can do it. Okay. They're not necessarily going to be breaking anything or destroying anything. It's mostly people who are curious just to see if they can do what they're trying to do. Then we have the blue hats. The blue hats, these are folks that are asked to hack into a system by an organization, but don't necessarily work for that organization. They hack into the system because it's what they enjoy, and an organization gets to test their systems. If you want to actually hack into Facebook, Facebook has a very specific set of rules for bounties that you can participate in. You can look it up, and Facebook will actually encourage folks the right way, I might add, to test their security in their systems. But again, check Facebook for more information about that. Don't just say, well, Mr. Ford said that. We'll find out more information before you try that. Then we have script kiddies. Script kiddies, this is not a compliment. In general, they lack skills and knowledge to build their own tools and crack systems. They're usually typically using other people's stuff. Just because they might lack the abilities, they can still be dangerous because, again, they use other people's tools and systems, and they had to work at some point in time, so they can still be a threat. Then we have people called hacktivists. This is a matchup of hack and activist. These are hackers who are motivated by a cause. Probably one of the most well-known hacktivist organizations is Anonymous. I am not making any clever remarks about that because I don't want the internet angry at me. But the hacktivists, they use various levels of skills. Some of them can be incredibly sophisticated to target different organizations. So like I said, one of the most well-known ones is probably Anonymous. Then we have the advanced persistent threat. These folks are the most dangerous of them all. They are extremely well trained. They have deep pockets. They are typically backed by countries or very large organizations. They usually have the best tools and equipment on the market. Groups in this category can plan and lay the groundwork for years before they actually attack. Pretty much every country who is, has a digital footprint have their advanced persistent threats, have their team of cyber experts who both defend and attack others. Then we have insiders. Insiders is the most common problem with dealing with security. We like to point at these sophisticated hackers and all these bad guys, but the reality is a lot of times people inside an organization can really mess with stuff.
I meant to do that.
And they're typically motivated by anger. Maybe they're jealous in an organization. Maybe they're ready to quit, or they're greed, or just plain old ignorance. I didn't mean to do that. Then we have organized crime. Organized crime, small to large organizational criminals can make a lot of money doing fraud, embezzlement, forgery, blackmail, etc. In fact, cyber crime it's one of the largest things that's going on right now. Organized cyber crime across the globe actually makes more money than the entire global trade of illegal drugs. Organized crime can either work anonymously or have the backing of powerful nation states or corporations. So, for example, think cyberpunk. Then we have competitors. Competitors in the industry try to get the upper hand on each other, sometimes through ethical methods, sometimes not so much. This could simply be an employee switching to a new company, bringing with them company secrets, or actual hacking into organizations. Okay. So doing good so far. All right, I'm going to get a little more coffee here. And we're going to continue looking. Let's take a look at physical security now. And this is just a brief look at physical security. We're going to get into this in much more detail in another live stream. So there are two general categories of threats when looking at physical security. You have natural threats. These are threats that originate from the environment. So, for example, hurricanes are a natural threat. They come from, the world. They come from Earth. We have no control over it. Mother Nature is doing this. Then we have man-made threats. Man-made threats are made by people. Okay, the threats can either be intentional or unintentional by a person or group of people. So natural threats, no control over, while man-made threats are things that are done by folks. And a threat, as defined by FEMA, is a natural, technological, or human-caused occurrence, individual, entity, or action that has or indicates the potential to harm life, information. Basically, it can do damage, okay, across a whole bunch of different spectrums. You might see a lot of different definitions. One of the more interesting things, I've got a lot of postgraduate work in Homeland Security and emergency management from the George Bush School at Texas A&M, as well as George Mason University. One of the wild things is trying to find definitions for common terms. And a lot of federal agencies have different words for these things, like threat or what a terrorist is. There's some overlap in definitions, and there's also some disagreements. So it's kind of interesting. So fire and flood. Like I said, we'll touch more on physical security later on in a different live stream. So let's take a look at fire and floods. So a fire alarm, which would be awesome if one went off right now. Fire alarm there's different types of fire alarms, and they tell you, hey, there's a fire. Okay. You've got the smoke detectors that responds to smoke. You have heat detectors that pick up increased temperatures. You have gas detectors that are going to respond to gases that are typically created by a fire. And then you have a light detector, which you do not want to have at a raid, or a rave, I should say. And it responds to changes in light intensity that typically go along with a fire. Then we also have fire suppression. So the fire alarm goes off, there's a fire. Now we want to try to stop the fire, because that would be a good idea. And we have water-based fire suppression systems. The most common one is the fire sprinklers, right? You see them up in the roofs, or the ceilings, I should say. They are great general purpose systems. They are also the most common systems you'll run into. So I'm in the classroom right now. We have water-based fire sprinklers. You go to apartment buildings, you go to the malls, you go to a lot of places. If they have sprinklers, chances are they are water-based. Well, the problem with water-based fire or sprinklers is that computers and digital technology doesn't really mix with water. They just don't go together. And so in situations where we might have a server room where we have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of hardware, computer equipment, the last thing we want to do is douse it with water. In fact, putting out the fire might cause more damage than the fire itself. And so we have to use something different, which is a gas-based system. And what the gas-based system does is it takes away the oxygen that the fire needs in order to survive. It takes away the oxygen that fuels the fire, and it can also cool down the fire zone. Now, what also requires oxygen to live? People. So, you don't want to be caught with the gas goes on to kill the fire. Let's put it that way. Oh, and there is the first time that PowerPoint crashed. I knew it was going to happen. So it did. So give me a second as I quickly bring back up the PowerPoint. There it is. Okay, let me switch screens for you. So fire. Okay, fire can feed off of different types of fuels. You have wood, you have paper, you have grease, electricity. You have even special types of metal. So different types of fires require different types of fire extinguishers. And so we have the A, B, C, and D. And the fire extinguisher A is water-based. It's good for common combustibles like wood, paper, and cloth fires. Think of A for ash. It's typically what winds up happening after you burn wood, for example, and it's water-based. Fire extinguisher type B is used to put out oil fires. If you throw water on an oil fire, well, congratulations, you now have more fire. So you don't want to throw water on an oil fire, so use type B fire extinguisher, and we think of B for barrel, as in barrel of oil. Then we have type C fire extinguishers. This is used to put out electrical fires. Think of C for currents. And D is used to put out flammable metal. Yeah, I didn't misread that. You can have types of metal that can catch on fire. And I think of D for this fire extinguisher because if you don't know what it is, D stands for dead. So run away. Let somebody else who knows what they're doing handle that fire. And I will say this, always call the fire department. Even if you put out the fire, always call the fire department after the fire or during the fire, depending on how bad the fire is. The reason why I say this is because the fire department will come out, and if you think you've put out the fire and the fire is out, you still call. Now, you don't call 911, you call the non-emergency line. Every fire department has those. And you say, hey, I put out a fire. Can you guys come out and inspect it to make sure the fire is actually gone? And they'll come out. And they're going to make sure the fire's out. Now, this is important because I actually had this happen to me. Years ago, I had an office on a second floor of an older building that had a lot of wood. And I was in my office late at night working on a computer about 10 o'clock at night. I was there late. And the skaters were outside, jumping their skates off the things and going down the rails and making all sorts of noise. And I hear a bang, 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 bang on the office window. So I go out there, and there was smoldering. There was smoke coming up from one of the wooden pillars. Well, I have a fire extinguisher on hand because, I'm working with technology. So I have an ABC fire extinguisher. And so I put out the fire, but I still called the fire department. I called the non-emergency number. I said, hey, we had a fire. I think I put it out. Could you all come out here and double check? So the fire department comes out and they proceed to just douse that area with water for quite some time. Because what I didn't know is that even though I put out the fire, that I could see the cigarette butt, see, told you smoking was bad for you. The cigarette butt that they were smoking, that they tossed, got into a crack into some of this old wood and was still down there smoldering. And if we had left for the night without calling the fire department, it could have caught on fire again, and that building could have burned down. So the fire department came out, saturated the entire thing, put out all the remaining fire, and I didn't even get a discount on my rent that month. So, boo. Anyways, so always call the fire department. Then we have floods. Water and computers, as you probably have guessed, don't go well together. Now, the question you might ask yourself, you might sit there and you might be watching me in Arizona, okay? Maybe you're not surrounded by water at all, okay? You got the desert out in your view, and you're going, I don't have to worry about floods. We don't flood. Well, actually, you could, because think about all of the pipes in your building or your home. If you're in a building and you've got bathrooms on multiple floors and you got water fountains and you've got sinks, you've got water going through your walls. And we actually found this out here in Texas. We had a big freeze. I want to say it was in February, a few years ago. And I remember I was traveling at the time, and I was on the second floor of a hotel out in the middle of nowhere. And they had the sheetrock cut away like waist high on the second floor. I was like, what happened? Well, during the freeze, the pipes froze, they burst, and they flooded out the second floor. So I was on the second floor. So it's not necessarily a river overflows or a lake overflows. It could be that your plumbing system in your home, in your business, could burst and cause flooding that way. So just an FYI there. As I just said, so what do? About water. Remember, water seeks its own level. Water doesn't like to climb. So the best solution is to have devices as high up as possible. If you're on the first floor of a complex and there's a history of flooding, move those devices to at least the top of desks. If there is flooding, then absolutely do not start the devices up until they have properly dried out. Do a little prayer to the computer gods that they'll still work, but absolutely positively do not start them while they are wet. That would be very, very bad. All right, let's take a look at electrical variation. I think this is our last part, and then we're going to cut the live stream off. So I think electrical variation is our last portion. So electrical variation is any kind of differences in electricity. For example, brownouts. Brownouts, the power doesn't go out, but it doesn't exactly go full strength. It kind of dips a little bit and it comes back up. Blackouts are self-explanatory. These are when the power actually goes completely out. You have a power spike. This is a big surge of power. This is really where all the danger is, because you get this huge of electricity, which can damage your digital devices. And of course, lightning storms, we get a lot, and I do mean a lot of storms out here in the Houston area that do have lightning. If you get hit or if you get a proximity strike, which is a very close strike, I don't care what you have your things plugged into, they can be seriously damaged, if not completely destroyed, because lightning, a lot of juice there. So how do we protect the computers? Well, there's two ways that we can do to protect our computers. One is something called a surge suppressor, and the other one called a UPS. A surge suppressor is just that. It will kill the surge. The surge wants to kill your devices, and a surge suppressor will suppress that surge. They have come down in price over many, many, many years, so they're very reasonable to get a inexpensive surge suppressor. You can also, if you own your home, have a surge suppressor put into your home, so the surge suppressor is right there with your electrical box, which handles the surges as well. We just had one in our house not long ago. Highly recommend it. Not that expensive to put in, and it gives us a bit of security when it comes to not just our computers, but our smart televisions, our gaming systems, our routers. You've got a lot of digital equipment now in your home. Then we have something called a UPS. A UPS stands for uninterruptible power supply. And you have both surge suppressors and battery backups built into the same device. One side will probably be a surge suppressor, while the other side will be a battery backup. So if the power does go out, you have a battery charge to shut your stuff down in a timely fashion. Okay. So here are some items, however, you do not want to plug into a UPS. A laser printer, these all use a lot of juice, which will break your UPS. So laser printers take up a lot of power. Space or room heaters, also not a good idea. They consume a great deal of power. Copiers, paper shredders, and vacuums. Now, there is no book I ever read that says don't plug a vacuum into a UPS. Not one book. And I've got multiple certifications. And I never saw don't plug a vacuum cleaner into a UPS in any book. And that's my story. And that's my explanation. Because when I actually plugged a vacuum into a UPS, I blew the whole thing away. It broke. Beep, beep, beep. Broke it right there and then. So take my word for it. Do not put a vacuum cleaner attached to a UPS. You will not have a good time. Of course, I had even more fun because I heard it from my wife and my kids going, aren't you supposed to know this stuff? Don't you teach this stuff? It's like, yeah. All right, physical security, lots of cybersecurity trainings and news stories focus on what happens in the digital world. But physical security is an important foundation for any cybersecurity plan. Act of physically protecting computers and electrical equipment and protecting it from intruders and natural events. And that is where we're going to kill it for right now. We'll have two more live streams regarding security because it is a relatively large chapter. And so I want to break these into more compact parts. I think we've been going for 44 minutes. So that's more than enough time for one live stream. So thank you very much. I'm kind of leaning towards live streams on Wednesdays and Thursdays because we are on block schedules, so we don't have the bell ring or anything like that. So have fun studying out there. We'll make some more out there. We'll put some more live streams out there as well as some A+ live streams. So I hope you guys are getting some use out of this and enjoying them. Please be sure to leave a comment. And also don't forget, we do have, let me throw that up one more time. We do have a Discord channel that you can join, full with my students as well as other folks. So feel free to join that. But until next time, have fun studying out there, and goodbye for now.